Okay, friends, this is how we nail gluten-free banana bread. If you have just been swapping out gluten-free flour for a regular banana bread recipe, we can do way better. No dense, gummy crumb, just light and fluffy and moist. It's all gluten-free wins here, and I'm gonna show you how. So the first common mistake that people do is if a recipe just says like 2 bananas or 3 bananas, you need to measure your bananas amount. So for this recipe, you need 1.5 cups of mashed bananas, which is 363 grams. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mash my bananas first and I'm going to measure them. It's approximately 3 to 3.5 large bananas. But depending on what size of banana you're using, like a large banana can weigh 100 grams. A small banana could weigh 60 grams. So if a recipe is saying 3 bananas, it can vary drastically, and then that's when you end up with those inconsistent results. When you're picking your bananas for this recipe, you want some ugly bananas. The uglier, the better. And then when you're mashing them, just make sure you get them as smooth as possible. All right, it's time for a moment of truth. Let's measure our bananas and see what we have. I have a little bit left over. Don't be tempted to throw it in there. You can throw it in some oatmeal or yogurt, but you do not want to put that in your banana bread. So we're gonna whisk together the liquid ingredients in a medium-sized bowl. So to that, we're gonna add our measured banana, 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar, 1/2 cup of oil, and you can use any preferred oil here, which is 102 grams, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and then 2 large eggs. All right, and then just whisk that to combine till it's nice and smooth. Okay, we're gonna set that aside and then do our dry ingredients in our larger bowl where everything's gonna come together. Okay, so I have 1 3/4 cup of gluten-free flour, which is 256 grams. I'm using cup for cup gluten-free flour, but honestly, with a recipe like this, with quick breads, you can use whatever preferred gluten-free flour that you have on hand. The reason why we do not want more or less bananas than we actually need for the gluten-free flour is because gluten-free flour does not absorb moisture as well. So if you have too much liquid in there, that's where you get that dense gummy texture. So you want the ratios to be spot on. And then for the leavening, I have 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just gonna stir that to combine. All right, and then I'm just gonna add my banana mixture to the dry ingredients and just stir that until you do not see any flour anymore. The good thing about working with gluten-free flour is you never have to worry about overmixing batters because there's no gluten to get tough in it. So mix away. In fact, overmixing actually helps gluten-free batters. Helps give that time to saturate all the starches. My batter is pretty thick because I'm using cup for cup, which has cornstarch in it. So it gives it like this kind of gummy texture, but then once it bakes, it's completely fine. If you're using another gluten-free flour, you might notice your batter has a different consistency. Now I'm gonna pour this in an 8x4 inch loaf pan. I like using the smaller 8x4 inch loaf pan because it gives it a nice dome top. You can bake it in a 9x5 too, but I've also noticed that when you bake it in that bigger pan, it'll just have a flatter top and you might need maybe like 4 to 5 minutes less baking time. So this is when we add a little magic to take this from a just okay gluten-free banana bread to great. So what I do is I'm going to let it sit in the pan for 15 minutes before baking. That just gives time for the gluten-free starches to soak up all that moisture. There's a lot of moisture in this recipe with the oil and the bananas, and it builds out the structure. That way when it bakes, you won't have that sunken middle or it won't sink after it comes out of the oven. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna bake it at a lower 325 oven versus a 350. This just extends the baking time a little bit and gives it a longer, slower rise, so also prohibiting it rising and then sinking after it comes out of the oven. And finally, I love adding this. I have coarse sugar, which I'm just gonna sprinkle it on top. This is totally optional, but it gives it like a nice crunchy little sweet finish to the top. So I'm just gonna sprinkle that on and then set it aside to rest for 15 minutes.
Oh, that looks beautiful. Look at that thing.
So I forgot to mention the bread bakes for about 55 minutes. It can take 55 minutes all the way to like an hour and 5 or 10 minutes. Now you want to make sure it's baked all the way through before you pull it. And you could do one or two things. I find a toothpick to be a little deceiving because it doesn't go down far enough. So I use a cake tester for this, which just is longer and has more surface area. So you want to put it in there. And then when you pull it out, you just want to make sure there's no wet batter on there. Sometimes it could look set. With high moisture breads, you really want to make sure that you check. The other thing you could do is use an instant read thermometer. So it's measuring about 190 to 95 degrees, right in the center, in the thickest part, and then you know it's done. So cool it in the pan for about 5 minutes, and then you could transfer it to a wire rack to cool. I wanted to show you guys something. So this is the beautiful loaf that we just baked, but then I also baked another loaf, and for this one, I did not let the batter set for 15 minutes. I just baked it straight away. So you can see just from the tops, the difference of the texture, where this one is more rounded out and this one has a little bit of sinking in the middle. The taste is going to be the same. You will notice a little better texture in the one that's rest, and I'll slice into that and let you see that. Here's the side-by-side of them sliced in. So you could just see this one, the crumb is a little bit more open and fluffier, where this one's a little bit more compressed. If you have the extra time, I do recommend letting the batter rest. So you can definitely just make a straight up loaf of banana bread, but this is prime for mixing. So of course, nuts, then you can add about a half a cup to 3/4 a cup. You can also, which my kids love, a lot of times I'll add chocolate chips to it. If I'm adding chocolate chips to banana bread though, I always make sure to line the bottom of my pan with parchment paper because they have a tendency to sink to the bottom. The other thing you could do is use a mixture of regular sized chips and miniature chips, and that just helps it disperse throughout. You could use dried cranberries or dried fruits. There are all sorts of things that you can that pair incredibly with banana bread. Gluten-free baked goods have a tendency to lose moisture quickly, so if you are not eating this the day or the next day, then I do recommend you could slice it and freeze it, and that way you can pull a slice out of the freezer, thaw, and warm it up and have a fresh baked banana bread slice anytime you want it. If you found this recipe helpful, I would appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, and you can find this recipe and all my other recipes on mamagourmand.com.